All right, I'm letting everybody in now. We're good to go.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. People are still filing into the main room. Welcome.
Hi, Monica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Whitney from BPL Presents. This is the Brooklyn Public Library's Arts and Culture Programming team. It's nice to see you all for this Brooklyn Book Festival bookend event celebrating Kia Corthran's new novel, Moon and the Mars. Before I introduce Kia and tonight's co-conversant, Sarah Schulman, I'd like to invite you to browse the live and virtual events of the festival. My colleague will drop some links in the chat so that you can follow what's coming up on Festival Day, October 3rd, including the library's official Festival Day talk with Mary Gateskill and Sherry Turkle on hybrid narratives, moderated by Megan O'Rourke. Those should be appearing in your chat just now. We'd also love to see you next week as Dr. Keisha Blaine discusses her new biography of Fannie Lou Hamer with historian Alexis Coe. And to keep in touch with us, you can always go to bklynlibrary.org, BPL Presents, and BPL Presents is also our handle on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where we're streaming tonight's conversation. So in Moon and the Mars, set in the impoverished Five Points district of New York City in the years 1857 to 1863, we experience neighborhood life through the eyes of Theo from childhood to adolescence, an orphan living between the homes of her Black and Irish grandparents. Throughout her formative years, Theo witnesses everything from the creation of tap dance to P.T. Barnum's sensationalist museum to the draft riots that tear New York City asunder amidst the daily maelstrom of Five Points work, hardship, and camaraderie. Meanwhile, white America's attitudes towards people of color and slavery are shifting painfully, transformationally, as the nation divides and marches to war. Kia Corthran's debut novel, The Castle Cross, The Magnet Carter, was the winner of the 2016 Center for Fiction First Novel Prize and a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice. She was the 2017 Breadloaf Shane Stevens Fellow in the novel. She's a nationally and internationally produced playwright. For her body of work for the stage, she has garnered the Wyndham Campbell Prize for Drama, the United States Artist Jane Addams Fellowship, the Horton Foote Playwriting Award, the Flora Roberts Award, the Simon Great Plains Playwright Award, and others. She was born and raised in Cumberland, Maryland, and lives in Harlem, New York City. She'll be in conversation with Sarah Schulman, a novelist, playwright, screenwriter, nonfiction writer, and AIDS historian. Her 20th book, Let the Record Show, A Political History of ACT UP, New York City, 1987 to 1993, has just been published by FSG, and I understand she'll be talking about it at the festival as well. Welcome to you both. It's nice to have you with BPL Presents.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you so much. I am so excited. I'm Sarah Schulman. I'm so excited to be here with Kia Corthran, an artist I have admired for decades. Her new book, I have read it twice. I can't wait to talk about it, but we're going to start with a reading from Kia.
Hello, I'm Kia, and as Joel described it, it takes place in the years leading into the Civil War, 1857 to 1863, in Five Points, which was the most impoverished district of Manhattan downtown. And there was a lot of intersection between the Irish and Black communities. So the protagonist is a child, aging 7 through 13 at that time, Theodora, which people call Theo, who had an Irish mother and a Black father. They're both dead, but she's an orphan, but lives between the tenement apartments of her Black and Irish grandmothers. So I'm going to read a little piece from her Irish side of the family, and then a little piece from her Black side of the family. So let's see. So for this piece, it's the summer of 1859. Theo is 9.5 years old. Kieran is 11 years old. Kieran is a family friend from Ireland who lives with Theo's Irish grandmother. Her auntie Siobhan shows up, who's her Irish aunt, and her Grammy Cahill has a table on the street where she sells wares. And I have to apologize for my Irish accent from the beginning. But if I don't say it, you'll be confused. I have to at least pretend that I can do this accent so that you will know who's who. Okay. We hear the music a block away before me and Kieran step inside the dance emporium. Packed, hot. A colored man at the piano, Irish fiddler, colored with the banjo. Everybody dancing, everybody jaunty. Only once did I ever attend a Kaylee back home, say Kieran, smiling. What's a Kaylee? Hold down, Americans say, partner dancing. Then the music stopped and the piano players say, here we go. The dance floor clear and everybody backing away from the center. Kieran and me craning our necks to see. An Irish man and a colored man come out, shuffling and stomping, finger snapping, heel spinning, clickety, clickety, tap, tap, tap. The fancy footwork. Everyone whooping and cheering, more, more, more. And they give us more. Then Kieran touched my arm, point, see if I couldn't see myself who took the floor, replacing the men. Auntie Siobhan lift her dress so we spy her ankles, stomping and clomping, slip slide, her feet so fast I hardly see them, rat-a-tat-tatting like rain on the roof. Then a colored man danced right up to Auntie Siobhan, click stomping faster, then she go faster, then he go faster. They ain't partnering, they competing. Everybody clapping and hooting, tap it, tap it, tap it. Auntie Siobhan win. Them both laughing. Then Auntie Siobhan go to the bar, leaning on it, the sweat pouring. Me happy the room's so crowded, she can't see me and Kieran here, seeing her. Other people's dance competing now, but hard for me take my eyes off my auntie. She swig her drink down, then turned to look right at Kieran and me, give us a wink. Next morning, Auntie Siobhan won the dancing last night. Grammy Cahill's eyes narrow at me over her table. And how would you know that? Oh, say nearby Maeve, Grammy's dearest friend and fiercest competitor. Your old granny's the real stepper in the family. Belle of Carey, she was. Grammy, who'd been getting ready to snap at me for being where I shouldn't have been, now go a little pink, then smile. Oh, granddaughter, close your mouth before fields of flies. What you saw last night when you were where you shouldn't have, they're the steps we brought over from the aisle. Yes, I had quite the click in my heels, stomping all over the county. Siobhan was the one I passed the magic feed on to. Then I, click, click, shuffle, slip, slide. Grammy, take the laughing. Maeve say, look like your fancy feet moved down another generation. Grammy's eyes look to the left, look to the right, no approaching customers. Then, sitting in her chair, her feet under the table start to move. Clickety tap, click. So that's the Irish family, the Irish side of the family. And I'm going to read a little from the Black side of the family. So this is summer 1858. So it's actually a year before. And Theo is 8.5 years old. Miriam is an escaped slave from South Carolina who came to live with the family. So she poses as Theo's aunt. She had been living with the grandmother in Five Points, but now she's newly married and living with her husband in the West 30s. Auntie Miriam and Mr. Samuel's house, big, front room plus bed closet, 3 rooms. The little bed closet Auntie Miriam called the room of hope. Auntie Miriam, like never was no depression your house. And you and Mr. Samuel got a yard. She nod, sit back, stare at her little window on her little garden. 'Twas a devotion. Mr. Samuel grew up 5 points, never he think to remove. But I longs for the air, this he do for me. Space the only thing I miss about Dixie. And my hands knowing the magic, knowing how to make soil deliver. Now her eyes turn to me. I gots to go out little while. You help me? I love helping Auntie Miriam. She opened a big jar of the concoction, almond oil, shea butter, beeswax. While I spread the liniment over her left arm and hand and back of her neck, she stared into her little round looking glass set on the table, applying it to her cheeks and chin, forehead, and eyelids. Auntie Miriam looked funny, light skin, her face and neck and hands, and dark everywhere else. But face and neck and hands, the only parts shows when she out and about, so them's the only places she need to potion. Here's what I reckon. Auntie Miriam remember Miss Sally, colored boarder who make herself light and pretty for the gentleman, and Auntie Miriam want to be with the fashion. Auntie Miriam, Africa at home, mulatto in the street. I amble with her to Miss Philippa's down in Little Africa, Greenwich Village. Auntie Miriam hand Miss Philippa some coin, and Miss Philippa passed Auntie Miriam a little pouch. Miss Philippa give a few instructions, and that's pretty much all the words they use up. I stroll with Auntie Miriam back up to the 30s. Guess you's big enough. There's days I worries, slave catcher right round the bend, but other days figure it never be, why master bother? Years I'm ripe and being cultivated, yet not once he planted in me nothing fertilized to increase his crop of darkies. You understand? I nod, but I don't know what Auntie Miriam's talking about. In the distant, the thunder rumble. And I knows Mr. Samuel and me only married a short spell. Still, Miss Philippa know her herb, gonna help me fill the room of hope. And Auntie Miriam's right fingers gentle caress Miss Philippa's pouch, left hand caress her belly. Then the sky opened, sheets hammering, we raced to her house. Even in the rain, Auntie Miriam's light skin cream barely smudged. Want me help clean you up, Auntie Miriam? No, I gets to it. I look at her. Usually she liked to wash the high yellow off second she walked through the door. Then I remember Mr. Samuel gone before crack of dawn, didn't get to catch a glimpse of his light wife today. Outburst big, not letting up. Getting toward dark and no Mr. Samuel. He got sense enough, wait out the storm, she say. You too, may as well stay the night. Then she pull out a deck. Pick. First, I don't know what. I never done no cards before, never been close to no heart, no diamond. Afraid I'm doing it wrong. Still, I go deep in the pile, glance it fast as she can't see. Leave it back atop as instructed. Auntie Miriam, shuffle, shuffle, pull it out. Deuce of clubs. How'd she do that? Broth and bread, then time to hit the hay. But she ain't hitting no hay. Auntie Miriam take to her rocking chair, light her smoke, waiting for Mr. Samuel. I never seen Auntie Miriam smoke before, but now she enjoy her pipe like she was born to it. I help wash the dishes, Auntie Miriam? I gets to him directly. She puff, eyes on the dark out the window. Wonder why she prolonging a chore. Then I know she don't want to stick her hands in no water yet. Now you really look like my auntie, Auntie Miriam. She turned to me, eyebrows a question. Or my mother, I giggle, except my mother was Irish. She couldn't look like her. Auntie Miriam's eyes stuck on me. I chuckle, but my laugh starting to lose air. Both us, pretty. Light. Her puffin stop, eyes narrow. You know why I do this, Theo. I stare. Auntie Miriam never sterned to me like that before. I nod. Then why you natter on? I don't know what answer I'm supposed to give to that. She sighed back to her rocking, eyes back to the window. Me and the crickets wait. I'm a homebody, likes my walls round me. But sometime gots to show my face in the world, the odd errand. I knows you likes cleaning the light skin off, but sometime I likes to wait for Mr. Samuel. Which is just what I reckoned, waiting for him to see her pretty and light, but figure best keep that reckoning to myself. Now Auntie Miriam looked to the looking glass, staring at her fair cheeks. No smile. She speaks soft, like more talking to the mirror than to me. No kidnapping me back whipping chains. South Carolina ain't never finding their dark skinned Lizzie. Not in the street, no how. Then we both quiet till my yawns sneak up and bellow. In my dream, I'm walking down Broadway with Auntie Miriam, and here come the slave catchers. Then I see Auntie Miriam forgot to put on her light-skinned disguise. Scared for her, you see, Lizzie, one of them say. I shake my head, no, 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 but surely they see my heart pound through my chest. Then Auntie Miriam beside me take to laughing, hold her belly rolling on the ground, the funniest joke. I start to smile, then feel my water. Wake up, slip outside to the privy, walk back when I'm done. On the stoops, a pail of water for clean and dirty feet. Rub them till they glisten, then step inside. A murmur from the other bed closet. Mr. Samuel must have come home while I was emptying myself. Creep back to the room of hope, notice the other door ajar. Mr. Samuel washing the light skin off Auntie Miriam. Chimney sweeping, Mr. Samuel always carried the soot filth, but now washed, him darker in me, but lighter in his wife. And on the bed, they sit together, her face already clean brown. Now he work her arms. He do it soft, his skin moving slow against hers, faces close to each other, eyes warm at each other. And where he washed off the light lotion and her brown flesh peeking through, he kisses, his lips against her clean, soft elbow, brown, soft lower arm, muscle and fat, slow and mellow, her shining deep, dark brown skin, delicate and strong. And the gentle and the tender and the smiling get to feeling so much like something private, like something ought to only be between man and wife, that I get the blush and scurry quiet back to my own room. Good night. That's it.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Kia. That's amazing.
It went on a little longer, probably, but sorry.
Mesmerizing. I really want to start talking about your book, but first I just want to talk a little bit about what you were doing before you were a fiction writer, because you and I emerged into the theater at the same time. I'm a little bit older than you, but you emerged as a playwright initially, and at a time when it was very common for most theaters in New York City to have all male, all white seasons. It's true.
Yes,
yet,
true.
You managed to be one of the most produced women and one of the most produced Black playwrights in the off-Broadway world at a certain time. And you were writing about subjects that no one else has ever put on the stage. Multi-generations of Black police officers in one family, pressure on poor families to give their children Ritalin. Your amazing play Breath Boom, which really should be revived and put on Broadway right now, about a community of Black women. How did you do it? No, I mean, I'm asking you this seriously and historically and truthfully. How did you get your plays produced?
Yeah, I don't know. I think at that time, I guess, because, it's interesting, because when I was in grad school, I went to Columbia, and I remember one of the professors there, and to be fair, he was sort of a freelance professor and he was very bitter. So that's not to say about everybody there. He was a little bit of an outlier, but I remember, it's funny, I haven't thought about this in decades, but I remember him saying that there was something about my work that that did not feel naturalistic. So therefore, now, by the way, this was a white male writer. To his mind, Black audience would not go for it because it wasn't naturalistic. And the fact that it was about Black people meant that white audiences wouldn't go for it. And so I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I got lucky at the right time, and I think people were interested in that. I called it sort of the way I wrote was sort of heightened realism, because they were realistic stories, but it was a little offbeat than what would be a regular naturalistic play. And maybe because I was writing things that at that time people weren't writing about, that an interest was taken, and I do think it was a little luck. So yes.
Well, it's interesting because very few people write novels and plays because they have different impulses. Plays are what people say and do, and novels are what people say and do and think and feel. But one of the things that's so fascinating about your transition into being a novelist is that you went from small plays with big subjects and small casts to huge novels with enormous casts. And was it that there was universes inside of you that just needed to get out, or how do you understand that?
Well, actually, I just by instinct would write a play if I, thought of something to write about, which, by the way, always would start with some political issue, a social justice issue that was something that I really felt that I wanted to write about. But when the idea came for my first novel, Castle Cross, which I can't really talk much about because the idea is the climax, so it gives it away. But I just realized it was bigger than a novel. I'm sorry, bigger than a play. I didn't think it was going to be that big a novel, but I knew it was going to, because it was, it was basically, I wanted to explore, at first it was going to be one character, then it became 4 protagonists, but what would lead them to the climax? So then I went back to their childhood, and so it just, and then it became 4 protagonists, and I really, I wanted them all to have their own stories. Somebody told me once, because it was such a long ass novel, somebody who was in publishing, one of the first people that I spoke with, had suggested it being just to focusing on 2 of the 4 characters, because they were the ones directly involved in the climax. The problem with that was, well, first of all, it's 2 white brothers and 2 black brothers. Ultimately, it became a story about brothers, and so it would then it would not be a brother. It would just be the white man and the black man who were not related. But also, and I know this isn't the reason why. I know the reason he wanted it was because they were involved in the climax, but it would essentially mean that the other brother, the other black brother who was gay, and the other white brother who was deaf would be cut out, So, and I had the sense that he, maybe because the white brother is somewhat involved after the fact in the climax, that could be part of it, but that would mean the umpteenth story about a disabled character who were only there in service of the able-bodied character, and that's not what I wanted. So I really wanted to be all about them. When I wrote this novel, because that novel was focused on 4 male protagonists, I decided this novel, I wanted to focus on women more so. So in Castle Cross, there are definitely women that are important. And in Moon and the Mars, there are definitely men that are important. But the focus is Theo, this little girl, her aunts, her grandmothers. So that probably answered your question, then went someplace else because I forgot the question. But
okay. Well, let's focus on your new novel. So this novel does a lot of important cultural work, and that reaches way beyond even the size of this novel. And the first thing that I want to start with is the history of slavery in New York. Mm-hmm. Many New Yorkers do not know that Black people were enslaved in New York for almost 200 years. And it is remarkable how this history has been repressed. Mm-hmm. And what that tells us is that so much of our historical fiction, of our movies, of our plays, of paintings, of every historical kind of telling of New York City is dishonest, because it's not including this. It's not including the 20% of New Yorkers during the American Revolution were enslaved Black people. And your characters live within the consciousness and the experience of this history. So can you just start by situating where they are in relationship to his slavery in New York?
Yes, actually, her Black grandmother was a slave until I think her 40s because I'm sorry, 26 or 27, 1827 is when slavery was abolished in New York. Although frankly, it was a little complicated because if you were born at, I was going to say at the right time, if you were born at the wrong time as a Black person, enslaved person, it was possible that until like a few people, it wasn't until like 1840 where they were freed because of just, these weird rules and laws. But generally it was 1827. And so when the book starts in 1857, it's been freedom generally considered for 30 years in New York. But yes, until that time, there was slavery in New York. I also think, I think sometimes maybe people think in a general way of slavery in the North, but it's kind of foggy and they think way, way, way back. And whenever we think of slavery, we always think of plantation slavery in the South, whereas also Northern slavery was a different quality of slavery. So for example, it was useful and somewhat of a prestige for a master to have slaves that could read, because then they could be their bookkeepers and things like that. Whereas, of course, it was against the law in the South. There usually weren't they didn't need as many slaves, and for that reason, sometimes marriage could be discouraged because because they didn't need a whole lot of slaves, and so it could be or not, I don't know if it's discouraged, but it was definitely not encouraged, or reproduction wasn't it, because they only needed so many slaves. It wasn't like a plantation, so there were just, and in that way, that doesn't make it easier, by the way, that you're just like the only by any means, but it was just a different quality to it that I think is lost in much of the literature, much of the movies, because slavery, they always go to the South, which was, it may be accurate to the South, but that's only half the story of slavery in the US.
Now, your story is set in two key neighborhoods in New York City that don't exist anymore. And I'd like to start with 5 Points. Now, there are still cities in America that have a neighborhood called 5 Points, Atlanta, Mobile, but in New York, it's disappeared. Can you explain to people what 5 Points was?
Yeah, and for New Yorkers, it's sort of like down where the court buildings are in Chinatown, like around that area. So it was the most, at that time when I'm writing, it was the most impoverished area. It was sort of built over a swamp, and and it was, I'll pick up my book and look at the map so I don't get it wrong, because it was actually it's where 3 streets intersected to make 5 points. And those streets, where is it? It's a Park Street and wait, Baxter. Oh my gosh, now I'm like mixing up exactly which were the streets that made the 5 points. Park Street and Chatham. Wow, I feel really stupid because now I'm mixing up which ones were the 5 points, because there's a really cool map in my book, but it doesn't say exactly where the 5 points were. Oh, I get it. Sorry. Mission, Park, and Worth. I think that's it. Anyway, it's where 3 streets intersected, but it went for, something like a 10-block square, and there were vast majority Irish, but there were also quite a few Black people. There was in the 1830s, there was a pogrom against Black people, and it reduced the population greatly. So there used to be a lot more Black people in that neighborhood. And reductions also came later. And but but the two biggest, there were also, by the way, probably after Irish, the next population were German. Germans were huge all over New York, and I guess the US at that time. They were probably what we think of Latinx now. Well, I guess Irish would be more like Latinx in terms of that, and then they would be the next population. Yeah, and so it was all mixed in this neighborhood, and there were also like certain streets were like they were mixed, but there may be this building is Black and maybe this one's Irish. This one is German. This one is German Jewish. There were different populations in that way. So
Now, why was it known as Notorious? Was that because it was racially mixed?
that was part of it. I mean, it definitely had just like the crime and but it was the red light district, and people, and there was that racial mixture, which, by the way, yes, because Blacks and Irish mixed that way all the time in 5 Points. Other place in the city and other place in the country did not look well on that. But for the most part in New York, it wasn't so much a dangerous thing, so much as people thought you were trashy. And both Black people would think, as well as white people outside of 5 Points, that was just a trashy thing.
Now, what was the fate of that neighborhood? How come we don't know about it anymore?
I think, eventually sort of Chinatown did come at the end of the book, which goes 15 years into the future. So it's 1878. Italians were coming in, and Chinese were coming in. And I think, actually somewhere late in the century, I think things started changing. Maybe it was a sort of a little gentrifying. I have to look that up because that's beyond the bounds of my book. So I didn't study that much as well, but at this time, and I think late into the 18th century, it still existed, but it kept changing, as I said, by like even just 15 years after the main story. There were less Black people, a lot less Black people. Irish people had lost the accent for the most because it was later generations. And again, there were Chinese and Italians that were also moving in. So it was changing.
Now, it's interesting that in your history, Irish people and Black people are mixing, because we now have a concept of later generations of Irish people being more separate from Black people. Now, does this have to do with the Irish people's own status in relationship to whiteness at the time?
Yeah, I believe that. But again, I really focused on this time, but I believe at a later time, it was, I will say this. In Ireland, there was a man, Daniel O'Connell, who was what was considered Irish emancipation, which in there, it actually had to do with them participating in government, in Parliament in England. And he was a leader in that, and actually was in Parliament. He wrote a big document where he wanted he very much supported abolition in the US, and he wanted Irish people in the US to support this. But even at that time, there was a lot of trying to assimilate, less so in 5 Points. I mean, it was there, but less so there. But certainly a lot of Irish around the city. I mean, they were just coming into power in terms of like earlier generations of Irish in terms of politics. And Tammany Hall was coming about at this time. So so I think in the struggle to fit in, because basically they were the lowest ethnicity, socially speaking, with Blacks being the lowest, they would be the next rung up. And yeah, it was trying to get further on the rung by both assimilating as time went on, and also absorbing the racist culture around them, the culture in power. So one reason I really wanted to concentrate in 5 points was because, and not at all to say that it was any utopia, but it felt like there was something, because it was so impoverished and everybody was struggling, that it felt there was less of that division and a lot of cooperation. And yeah. And the piece I read was yeah, they like dance halls were a place that there was a lot of intersection, and in fact that's where Theo's parents met, in a dance hall. So
now another neighborhood that's central to your book, which no longer exists, is Seneca Village. Mm-hmm. So can you tell people about that?
Sure. As a matter of fact, I was really interested in writing about Seneca Village. So when I was deciding how many years this book would go on, and trying to make it not quite as long as my first novel, so I wound up starting at 1857 because that was the last year it was in existence, and I wanted to be part of the story. So Seneca Village was, I think, like West 82nd to West 89th, inside what is now Central Park. And it was a neighborhood of Black people, and there were also immigrants. There were Irish and there were Germans. But the thing about Seneca Village was that a couple of generations before, the homes, the land was given to Black people. So they became the gentry. They were the landowners, and the immigrants would pay rent to them. And this was especially important. I mean, you can imagine that there weren't many Black people who own land, but especially important because you had to own land to vote. And so, there weren't that many Black people at all that could vote, but almost all of them were in Seneca Village. And the city decided to take the land and make this park, which for a while, because there was nothing really much like that before. When people would say the park, they meant City Hall Park. Which is a still park, that park today, because that was really the only park in Manhattan. So when they took the land to make this park, and the park and its people, I think that's the name of the book, wonderful book about the history of Central Park. And for a while, and that's where I got most of my information about Seneca Village, actually, they were thinking of having the park more to the east, but it partly became the wealthy people who own mansions on Fifth Avenue. That would be more problematic for them. Whereas where Central Park would not touch them, but rather would make Central Park their backyard and raise their own property values. And so it ultimately, it became this thing that was supposedly a public good, but they destroyed this neighborhood for that reason. A neighborhood, by the way, where, I'm talking about 5 points and the camaraderie, but there was also very much camaraderie in that neighborhood. But yeah, it was destroyed.
It's interesting because I just want to shout out my partner, Leslie Harris.
Yes, whose book I read. And I love
her book is called In the Shadow of Slavery, and it's a history of Black people in New York.
It's a fantastic book, yes.
Yay. And one of the points she makes is that from the moment Black people were brought to New York as enslaved people, their neighborhoods were consistently gentrified and they were pushed further and further and further. And it's still true. And that this has been a consistent process in the city from the beginning. And Seneca Village is part of that. But I was interested that you said you had to be a landowner to vote. So, and I know that only men could vote, but
Yes.
when were Black men allowed to vote in New York City? Or when did Black men win the
If they
vote?
had land, they could vote. I mean, there was,
Even before emancipation?
well, this was past New York emancipation, because that was 1827. So yes, I don't know about before. But by this point, if they had the land, and it was some number that Leslie will know, but I can't, but it was something like $250 worth of land or something like that. There was a specific number. But I'm sorry, I'm missing something really important. That was the rule for Black men to vote. White men could vote regardless. That's really important.
Okay.
That you did not have to own land to vote as a white man. So the Irish could vote, the poor Irish. I'm glad I caught that. Yes. But for a Black man to vote, he needed the land. So yes.
And I think Tompkins Square Park was created because of emancipation in 1827. That's the reason that there's Tompkins Square Park, because the governor was Tompkins.
Yeah, that's probably something in her book that I've forgotten. By the time I came around, that area was very German. I mean, I'm sorry, by the time of what I'm writing, it was very German.
Right. Now, the dawning of the Civil War is a huge centerpiece of your novel. Can you explain a little bit, what was New York City's true relationship to the Civil War? I mean, all of us Northerners have all this mythology that we're raised with, that the North was always, had no ambivalence about its enslavement. You're from Cumberland, Maryland. You probably were raised with a different story. But what was New York's true relationship to the Civil War?
Yeah, I was raised, so where I grew up was in the South, they say the further south, Appalachian. We said the Appalachians because I was like a valley of the mountains. And I do remember as teacher in school correcting somebody who said the Civil War, and they said, no, it's a war between the states, which is a very southern thing to say. I have to say, though, my sister, so by the way, this town was like, my high school was like 300 kids, 10 were Black, and that was the only people of color. So it's very, very white, very working class, except I always said non-working class because all the factories and things closed. So nobody was working. Eventually, after I grew up, a Walmart came in and a jail prison came in, like every other town like that. But I do have to say this in defense of my small town where I grew up. My sister, Kara, who is also a writer, she's in LA, she's a novelist and playwright, and she writes TV. We were really touched recently because someone from Cumberland had sent us these pictures of a march, mostly white people, because that's what Cumberland is, for Juneteenth. And they were holding signs that said Black Lives Matter. We were both so touched because we could not imagine that when we grew up. So what was your question again?
What was New York City's relationship to the Civil War?
Yes.
Or the war between the states, yeah.
Yes. So yes. So it was, well, it's funny because I'm going blank right now myself, because it was something else. It wasn't called Civil War then, but there was something that the war
of succession.
For what?
The War of Succession?
No, I think it was the war for what's the opposite of secession? The war for bringing us back together. Yeah, it was something like the war for unification. There's a better word from that Leslie will tell you later, but somehow I'm completely blanking on it. But Well, at first, so there was no draft for the first couple of years of the war. So for people who don't know their Civil War history, and believe me, I forgot so much stuff from high school if I ever knew it. So I learned a lot just doing this book. But, you know, it was like 1861 to 65, kind of exactly, because it starts out in Appomattox was April of 1865, and the first shots in South Carolina were April of 1861. So it was exactly 4 years. So the first 2 years, there was no draft, but people were very excited to join up, and the Irish did in droves, enlisted in droves. And they partly thought, they were sure it was going to be over so quickly, that people will be back. So this was April, you know, by 4th, maybe 4th of July, but definitely by Christmas, it would all be over. They would rout them, which mathematically makes a lot of sense, because there were so many more people in the North, and about a quarter of the people in the South were enslaved. So they probably weren't going to be doing it for the South. So, there was a general who came out of West Point, who was this brilliant general that Lincoln tried to be the general for the Union. He asked him, and he considered it. But when his Virginia seceded, then Robert E. Lee went for the South. And yeah, it was Robert E. Lee kept it going for a long time, more than, and there were also less brilliant generals in the North for a long time. So anyway, there was this excitement for a while, and many Black men wanted to join, but they couldn't. They could go to Massachusetts if they wanted to join, but in New York, it was illegal at that time. They could not enlist, even though they were the people that had the most, you know, the strongest reason, most passionate to join because of slavery. Now, many white people at that time and many Union soldiers were not thinking it was at all for slavery. They were there to save the Union. And I think what is the War for the Union? I think that's what it was. And as the war went on, and they realized that whenever the North would win the battle and occupy, that the slaves were released, it started to dawn on them that, wait a minute, this seems to be a war against slavery. And a lot of them were not happy about that. That is not what they intended at all. So then there became a lot of tension, especially because the Civil War was a bloody, bloody, bloody war. I mean, in Gettysburg, for example, the total casualty, so that's wounded and killed, was 50,000. I mean, we're talking, you know, 1863, 50,000 people on a field. And so I think the Union won it, but I think they lost like 20,000, you know, and that was their victory. So all of that excitement became less and less exciting. And at some point in 1863, it looked like it was turning better. That was after Gettysburg. So Gettysburg was when Lee, really with his hubris, and he earned a lot of hubris, he was good at what he did, slipped up north into Pennsylvania, and because that was like the turning point. And then when the Union won that, and they went back below the Mason-Dixon, and then there was also in Mississippi a major battle there that the Union won. So Lincoln was feeling really good, and so he thought, let's pull in the draft, and we can really end this thing, which of course didn't for 2 more years. And the draft by that point, with so many people loss of life, was not welcome. And things exploded in New York City. And it wasn't the only place where it exploded at all, although I think the draft riots in New York are probably the most famous, the biggest. Yeah.
Now, was this a racist riot, or is this poor and working people who didn't want to go into the military?
Um, I love that Sarah asked that question because I'm sure she knows the answer. But she wants to
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Oh, well, both. Both. Yes, it was absolutely both. This is a really important thing that happened. So there were two things that were going on at that time. There was, as I said, Tammany Hall, and there were a lot of Irish, usually like second generation or third Irish that had come to power. And they would, to get votes, they were actually very supportive. Interestingly, Tammany Hall at first was not so Irish. As a matter of fact, it was kind of started anti-Irish because of, the dirty Irish, this whole class thing. But eventually they realized there was a lot of Irish, that's a lot of votes. So then they became pro-Irish. And then, of course, Irish began to become part of Tammany Hall, being elected in. And they would do things for the poor Irish, like, there were depressions that happened at that time, recessions and depressions. And even a recession when you're already on the edge, as people were in 5 Points, it was like near starvation. I say near because Theo's family were refugees from the famine in Ireland. So it was definitely not a famine. There were ways, but it was not good. It was, it was pretty devastating. And Tammany Hall would send food to Irish, Irish families. So, but they also like to pit Irish against Blacks. So, if they are free, they will come and get your jobs in a situation where people there were already having really difficult time working. When the war started, there was a lot of work for a while because it was the whole war engine. But that led to inflation. So the people that had jobs for a while now could no longer afford basic needs, the poorest. So, when people, so then the other side of the coin were the Republicans. Now the Republican Party was a very new party. Lincoln was only the second candidate they'd ever had for president. They had one before who lost, who was a really great guy. He was a radical. Lincoln was left of center, but more moderate. But there were some, like Seward from New York, who might have been the candidate, but Lincoln beat him in the Democratic primary, was much more radical. I mean, he wanted slavery ended now. Lincoln, who said that he was morally against slavery and said so in his speeches, accepted it where it was, but did not want it to in the West, to be further in the Western states. Some people said that maybe the Civil War was not about slavery in the South, but slavery in the West, because it was, people were accepting in the South, whether they liked, may or may not liked it, but they accepted it. But it was that all this stuff was going west and bleeding Kansas, everything that was going out there. So, so the Republicans were kind of like, some of them were kind of like bourgeois liberals. Some of them were. And they could at times favor Black people over the Irish. So you had these two factions pitting the people at the bottom of the social rung against each other. Which was a tangent away from your question, I know.
But it sounds very familiar because you're describing the divide and conquer that has always ruled.
Yes,
country.
yeah.
Unfortunately, we only have 6 more minutes, so I wanted to ask you 2 questions.
Okay.
And I see Eva posted this, but I had it already here. So your book, one of the many, many, many wonderful things that your book covers is the invention of tap dancing. So can you go a little bit into the historic roots of tap dancing?
Yeah, well, thank Ann Binder, who had that seminal book, 5 Points, that was one of my Bibles. So yeah, it started in those. What I'm reading is the chapter that speaks about that, the one thing that I read. And it started in the dance halls of 5 Points, where it was sort of Irish stepping that they brought over from Ireland, and stomping that came traditionally from Africa that people took down for generations in the Black community. And that all came together in 5 Points in these dance halls. And which is why when I'm having people saying, tap it, tap it, tap it, it's my, they didn't call it tap dancing yet, but it was my little clue. At the end of the book, I tell people that by the 20th century, it began to be called tap dance.
But is it controversial to claim that tap comes from New York City? Because don't other parts of the country think they own it?
I don't know, do they? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna look that up.
That's interesting because I've only read about it from New York, so maybe, I don't know.
So this is my final question. Can you compare the life of poor Black people in 5 Points in the 1850s with the lives of poor Black people in New York City today? And how would you describe those two realities in relation to each other?
Yeah, that is a big question. I think in some ways, what you said earlier, the eminent domain thing about like what happened to Central Park and gentrification, in some ways, I think, that was definitely going on and that came down. And New York became, by the end of the Civil War, a lot whiter. And a lot of that had to do with terror. But yeah, and I think also somewhat what I was talking about, my long ass answer to your short question about the divide and conquer thing, about Black people, as in that time also poor Irish, being used politically, by politicians who may or may not actually be helping the community, using them, and ultimately today using them to get votes, but at that time using them to promote a certain political philosophy without really doing much for Black people. Again, I'll say there were some fantastic people, white abolitionists, but they tend not to be the ones who got elected. So, maybe they were elected, but not as high in office. So,
well, that's still true. But one of the things that that really resonated with me reading your novel, and I felt like has not changed at all, is housing. I mean, you really show us people totally overcrowded, having to take in relatives who are in desperate straits. Yes. And we're in the same boat today, and it's people of color and poor people, and this has never changed.
Yes. No, that I would absolutely say in general for the poor, I would, yes, it's funny because I was very, I did lots and lots of research, very intimidated when I first started writing the novel, because I had to go back 150 years. And it took me a long time to finally push myself and do it, because I knew I could only keep writing drafts that were wrong till I got them right. But it's funny, Sarah, you saying that probably articulates more than I thought to this moment of it wasn't as hard as I thought, because some of it so much resonates to now.
Well, I think there's a whole trend right now of Black intellectuals writing Black historical fiction set in New York. There's your book, there's Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge, there's Harlem Shuffle from Colson Whitehead. There's a real push right now to revisit and retell in a more honest way. But it's also because I think of this historic continuity, that for certain people in this city, some things have just not changed. And the need to confront that. I mean, at least that was my take on it.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I do think we need to look to history to keep things from going back to the way they were. But I also think we need to look to history to understand where we are. And I think both of those were going on with me when I wrote it, but more so the second of those.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Kia.
Thank you, Sarah.
Moon and the Mars. Get it, people. It's a fantastic novel. And thank you to Brooklyn Book Fair and for
Yes,
giving us
thank
this
you.
opportunity.
Yes, the library and the book fair. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so
Right.
much, Kia. Congratulations on the book, Sarah. Thanks for your great questions, and to everyone here in
Thank
the
you.
audience. We hope to see you back at Grand Army Plaza as soon as we can when people are vaccinated. And don't be shy about heading out to the Brooklyn Book Festival. The rest of the week there are bookends, and festival day is Sunday. We'll see you all there. Kia, congrats. Sarah, thanks again. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.